Hello, everybody. Welcome to Careers in Psychology and Social Work, our Insights to Industry Q&A panel this afternoon. And we're also going to get a chance to do some networking with some industry people as well. So think about some questions that you might want to ask them. During the panel session, you'll also be able to ask questions. But if you find that you don't get a chance, then there'll be plenty of opportunities afterwards. This is going to drive me nuts. Okay, for the people online, the screen is not actually going to change. So we have a lighting issue here and you won't be able to see the participants, unfortunately, but you will be able to hear. So just treat this like a podcast. So my name is Liz Hendry. I'm a careers consultant, but I'm also the manager of the Careers Centre here. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we're meeting today. Of course, we're in Darwin here. We're on beautiful Larrakia country. And I pay my respects to their elders past and present, and I extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today or online. Just a bit of housekeeping, emergency exits. You'll see the green lights at the back, and there's two here at the front, like an air hostess. We'll meet out on the front, out on Boab Court, if anything happens, but just follow the CDU staff. Toilets are out the back doors and around to your right if you need them. And Tasphere will be taking photos and maybe a bit of video during the day, purely for us to use on our social medias and in our quarterly reporting. So if at any time you don't want to be involved in that, just let Tasphere know and we will make sure that we don't use your photo in anything. So welcome to our Insights to Industry event in collaboration with the Faculty of Health, Careers in Psychology and Social Work. The Careers Centre's Insight to Industry program is designed to equip students and graduates with a comprehensive understanding of career options and effective strategies for securing roles within the industry. We create opportunities for students and graduates to connect with industry professionals, to build your professional networks, and to learn all about the amazing opportunities that are around Darwin, the Territory, and even further afield. Many thanks to everyone involved in bringing this event together today. Thanks to industry partners, to the people on the panel. Thank you very much for giving up your time. Thank you to everyone who's here to network with students. It's a really important thing that you're doing and giving students the opportunity to talk to you. Many thanks to our champion academics, some of whom are sitting on the panel today, and faculty staff who connected us with their contacts in the industry and helped us promote these engagement programs. And finally, thanks to students and graduates who are here with us today. We have the next hour to hear from the panel, and then we're going to open up to some networking, and there'll be some light refreshments out in the foyer, which you can all help yourselves on. Okay, so let's get started. So I haven't introduced the panel, so I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves, tell us what you're doing now and a little bit about yourself. So I have a microphone here, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. We'll start at the boring end, I guess. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Dr. Kim Caldwell. I am a senior lecturer in psychology in the Faculty of Health. My career is a research career, one that was started probably a lot like some of yours with a general interest in the mental health field. But as I progressed with my studies, became a bit more interested in pursuing a research career. So some of my responses today will be shaped by that lens. I'm filling in for our head of discipline, Tinashe June, who's unfortunately unwell today. So I'm going to do the best I can. But yeah.
Thanks, Keith.
Hi, everyone. My name's Dr. Andrew Richardson. I can see lots of familiar faces in the room, so I think lots of people know me already. I'm the course director, or course coordinator. That's from an old job, that language. Course coordinator for the Bachelor of Social Work. So I'm a social worker. a proud social worker, have been for over 20 years. And I'm also the branch president for the Australian Association of Social Workers NT branch. That's me.
Hi, my name's Shirley Hussey. I'm the clinical lead with ESA, which is Employee Assistance Services Australia. I'm a social worker as well. I was a latecomer. I didn't start studying until I was 40. Been in the industry for a long time now. And yeah, love it.
Hi, my name's Susie Myers. I'm one of the senior psychologists at SWIPS, which is Student Wellbeing, Inclusion, Programs and Services at the Department of Education and Training. And yep, I started a little later too. I started studying, I wanted to become an archaeologist, and then thought I would rather dig in other spaces and became a psychologist instead. So love the work, have never looked back, and yeah, look forward to talking about it.
Hi everyone, my name's Ira. I'm here from the NT Mental Health Coalition, which is the peak body for community mental health services across the Northern Territory. In terms of my career, I'm actually not a social worker. I'm standing in for someone as well, but I studied with CDU. I have a Cert 4 in Leadership and Management, but I've been working in the mental health sector for the better part of 8 years now. So working alongside a lot of really cool people, including social workers, psychologists, and yeah, a lot of information and resources to share.
Hi everyone, my name is Stacey Bridges. I work at the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Team as a psychologist. I've lived in Darwin my whole life, and I've even studied here at CDU. Recently graduated my master's about 2 years ago maybe. Yeah, I'm also standing in for Meredith, who's the psychology lead of our department. But yeah, so in psychology as a psychologist, 2.5 years at CAMS, but I have worked in top and mental health in the forensic team before, and also in the prison settings. So yeah.
Okay, thanks everybody for introducing yourself. Would everybody please welcome the panel? Okay, so let's get straight to the point. What advice would you give to students seeking work in your field? Who wants to start?
Advice for any of you who are looking at going down the psychology route. Depends what part of your studies you're at. I think you need a lot of persistence and determination for psychology. It's about 6 years if you want to go down into masters. But I think, yeah, persistence, determination, you have to have a passion for it. I did my undergrad when I just came out of school, and I had a bit of a break to think about whether psychology was the career path that I wanted to go down into. So I found that break was a good thing for me to help get experience within the workforce into mental health, and really at that point then realized, yes, I do want to go into psychology. And so that helped create some clarity for me. I don't know, does anyone else have their experiences?
Oh, I can go from my experiences. So although I'm not actively, obviously, a social worker or psychologist, my journey leading into mental health started essentially working in health. I was actually a dental assistant for the better part of 7 years. I did some volunteer work with young people around sexual health education as a peer educator, which then led me to opportunities to actually start working in the mental health field. I think one thing I would kind of share with you all is like, every opportunity is an opportunity for you to figure out what you want to do. Don't be afraid to jump into volunteer work, reaching out to community mental health organizations to see what kind of roles there are, even in the non-clinical space, because chances are it'll probably feed into your interest working, progressing into either social work or psychology. So don't underestimate that. Like, don't be afraid to try those new things outside of a clinical space.
Yep, I agree with what you said. And also adding on to that, in psychology, keep an open mind. I remember when I first started studying and I thought, well, I'm going to have people lying on a couch and then I'm going to do the therapy thing, you know. There is so much more to psychology. It is such a varied space. There's so many things to do. There's so many ways you can be a psychologist. So just to keep that open mind and, you know, yes, decide on psychology because it's the best thing to study, but then keep an open mind because almost. But yeah, keep an open mind because there's so many opportunities in psychology.
Yeah, and I agree with everything everyone has said so far. I guess my advice would be, I think I can speak for psychology as well, but social work and psychology, can be extremely challenging, but extremely rewarding. And my advice would be to prioritise your own self-care and to alleviate burnout, because it's an industry that it's not for the faint-hearted, so to speak. It can be pretty grueling, and to sustain and maintain your career, you need, from my experience, my lived experience, you need to prioritise self-care and work-life balance. So that would be my tip.
Thank you. I disagree with all of you. No, joking. Just thought I'd spice things up a bit. So absolutely, really great advice. Speaking from my personal experience, one of the best things that I did was volunteer work. And I think a couple of people might already remember me talking about this. I did Lifeline when I was studying. So it was volunteer work alongside paid employment and studies. And that was really fantastic. So I know that you're busy and you've got lots on and stuff like that. But if you can create space for some kind of professional opportunities, volunteer work, etc., that's really great and will stand you in good stead for future employment, and you'll gain really great skills. I would encourage you to be open and not fixed about stuff. I was a bit rigid when I was studying. I thought I want to do one thing in particular, and I ended up in completely different contexts. So I suppose particularly for students in terms of approaching placements, to be open to the possibility that you might be offered a placement and it turns into a really great opportunity. It might be an unexpected area that you didn't think you might want to work in. And then finally, I would just also say to be thinking of yourself as someone where you're meeting people like today, that you are meeting your future colleagues, potential employers. So to be engaging and conducting yourself with professionalism, with an eye to potential networks and contacts in the future, because people, you know, that graduate from our courses as well often come back as guest speakers, or indeed may come back and work for CDU at some point as well. So that's from speaking from, you know, this employer's perspective. But when you're on placements, it might also be that it's a potential employer for you as well in the future.
Yeah, I guess I would add, so how many of you guys are kind of studying undergraduate? If we can get a show of hands. Okay, almost half, like postgraduate. Okay, cool. So I would say keep your options open. So I didn't really know this pathway was available to me until I was kind of halfway through my undergraduate degree. And I think a lot of that's predicated on, you know, you go to school, you're told, work hard at school, go to uni, get your degree. That's your career for the next 40 plus years. Then you can retire and enjoy life. I didn't really know until I was halfway through the journey that, you know, university is a time to figure out who you want to be and what you want to do. You don't have to have it all figured out at this point. So kind of follow your instincts. For myself, I enjoyed a lot of the research stuff I was doing more than I was enjoying some of the more applied stuff. I was kind of pretty good at both, but I had to kind of pick a lane. So I've done lots of cool stuff, done a lot of traveling, a lot of lying on the couch, I think, rather than in the chair, which, you know, if you're interested in that research career pathway. I think too, we talk a lot about practice, and we do desperately need psychologists and social workers and mental health professionals, but we also need really strong evidence bases and really strong research so we can lobby, change policy, create change, make things work for people. So that's a really important end of it too. So if you're sitting here in the audience today thinking about, you know, I think I've got this idea in mind, I'd encourage you to keep a bit of an open mind and have a couple of contingencies, because you never really know what opportunities are around the corner, especially here in the NT.
That's the great thing about a career path. It's not a straight line. So you can zigzag in and out. You can do research for a while. You could then move into practice. You know, there's lots of different ways that you could take this and, you know, potentially have it all. Yeah. Okay. So, what are some of the big challenges that you face or have faced in your career in different roles? So it may be that you worked somewhere that was really challenging and you found that that was difficult and wanted to move into another area, or perhaps you found ways to deal with those challenges. So Kim, you can start us off.
I was going to yield my time for people with more varied and interesting careers. Yeah, research careers can be challenging, especially when there's competition for resources, funding opportunities, things like that, competition between academics. Competition doesn't really work that well for us in the territory. So I guess having a really collaborative, open mindset will work for a lot of us. I think that's probably about all I can say to that.
Okay. So just challenges, I think, one thing that I experienced personally, and also just what Shirley spoke about before, is just that concept of burnout. I think people in roles such as myself doing engagement with the community, largely, you know, providing information and education, but also seeing in this role now social workers, psychologists experiencing that level of burnout, it's definitely something that I would kind of get people to think about. I was working with a youth mental health organisation for the better part of 7 years, and because of burnout and not realising and really waking up to the fact that perhaps I wasn't doing too good, it's sort of like part of my messaging now to actually really say to you, like, yeah, think about strategies to look after yourself, thinking about like supports around you. Yeah, it is really important, because for me, it was something that kind of crept up and kind of knocked me back. And I was like, oh, okay, so this is what burnout is. This is what people have been talking about. So absolutely one of the challenges that I'd get people to really put in front of mind in your practice, because I know a lot of us, especially social workers, psychologists, we've all got that want to help and make a difference, which is really great, but we've got to think about like, how do we actually achieve that while looking after ourselves and still doing fighting the good fight.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think going on from what you're saying is we came into this field to help, but asking for help is possibly not a strength that we have. A challenge that I've faced personally and that I've worked with many colleagues who have also faced is coming up against ethical dilemmas. And that could be one way that might look is if you're working in an organisation and there's a clash of values, either with a manager or a colleague, or policies and procedures that you have to adhere to. So how that can be a huge challenge. And now working in an organisation that supports staff in the Northern Territory, I cannot stress enough how seeking help and getting either counselling through an EAP service or having a safe space in your supervision or counselling can make the world of difference. So I really encourage you to get really good at seeking help.
I think there's two areas where I've sort of had those challenges. One is implementing change. So once we've got those evidence-based sort of structures, when I went on from being a therapist to becoming a school psychologist and implementing whole school approaches, wellbeing approaches in different countries, and then noticing how some are much less likely to want to change than others. So coming up with just implementing change can be a real challenge. And I'm noticing that as well in my new role, in connection with a whole new challenge of the Northern Territory. So we've got this huge territory, and we've got so many schools across this territory, and for some schools, it takes 4 days to drive to this school, and then you're there to implement change, and that's hard. So just being tenacious, knowing what you're actually there for, having realistic goals, and not being beaten down when things don't work straight away. So yeah, that tenacity is important then. But yep, the territory has its very own challenges in that area.
Yeah, so building on basically what everyone else said, I agree. You mentioned challenges across the whole career though. So as a psychologist, yes, I agree. There's definitely the burnout, and, we have to take care of ourselves and engage in those self-care practices. But I will focus a little bit on the study as well. So for me, as I mentioned a bit before, I had a bit of a break. So going through study can be challenging in itself. And I took a break to then be an Aboriginal mental health worker for the forensic mental health team. And that was a really good experience that I enjoyed. The next challenge was, obviously, there was a manager who helped me to kind of see, okay, do you want to keep going? Do you know, or do you want to stay as you are? I think that for me was a challenge then, because going through psychology, you've got undergrad, then you've got honours, then you've got masters, and there's different challenges that you've got to kind of jump through. And I think what everyone else had mentioned about being open to the opportunities that you get and the work experience that you get helps. And I think if I hadn't taken that break to really get the experience, even though I wasn't a psychologist, I was an Aboriginal mental health worker, it gave me that perspective of knowing, okay, this is something that I want, and this is a passion that I will persist and try harder to achieve. So that was, one of the challenges in my study and career, to then get to become a psychologist. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. I'm hearing resilience is the key. That word gets thrown around a lot, but it seems like it's really important. Okay, so now that we've sort of looked at a few challenges and we've looked at some skills and attributes, can you tell us a bit more about the variety of your job? So what is it exactly that you do in a job? What does your day look like? And who are the people that you're serving or helping? Yeah.
All right, I guess I'll start. So I'll talk broadly about social work, different social work roles that I've had, because I'm currently in an academic role. So I guess I've worked in different places, and I think that that's one of the beauties of social work. I don't know about psychology. Other panelists might comment on that, but I think having a social work degree gives you lots of opportunities in lots of different fields all around the world, in my experience. So I did a placement. My second placement was in a rural area of southern India. I've done some volunteer work in Bangladesh, and I worked for nearly 20 years in London in the UK. I'm originally from Melbourne. I studied in Melbourne. So I've had a variety of different roles. Direct work with service users. That's how we generally refer to people that we work with in social work. Worked a lot with people with disabilities and their families. I worked in mental health. I also later trained as a psychotherapist as well. So did some of the, to do that, I had to lie on the couch myself a lot, and then worked with clients in that, I guess, kind of counselling type of way. So yeah, that's me. Did I answer your question? Yeah. All right. Someone else want to have a?
I would encourage you to lie on the couch as often as possible. Invaluable. So I had an advanced diploma in holistic counselling, and I applied for a job with Relationships Australia in Queensland as a counsellor, relationships counsellor. And their minimum criteria was a bachelor of either psychology, social work, or counselling, which I had none of, but they liked me. It was for a little obscure town and with very few options on their behalf. So they offered me the position on the proviso that I obtained my bachelor in something. And so I was looking at, well, do I do counselling? Do I do social work? They were the two options, really. I didn't want to go down the psychology path. And I just felt there was more options with a social work degree, because I had but even though I wanted a career in counselling. So that's what I did. And for those who want to be, because in my mind, it's either counselling or case management kind of thing. So for those that want to be a counsellor, the organisations will take, qualifications with psychology, counselling or social work generally. So, yeah.
Can you just ask the question again?
A day in your job?
A day in my job. Okay, currently.
Yeah.
Right. So, as senior psychologist, one of my jobs is to try and ensure that every student in the Northern Territory can access education. So in our team, which is student wellbeing and inclusion programs and services, we sort of target those students who can't typically access that because they may have a disability or there's something else going on for those students. So we implement programs, we upskill teachers, we upskill staff, we do small group programs with children. We do individual work with children and adolescents. We run assessments, all for the best interest of the student. So, and that's NT wide. So that's a day in my job looks really, really varied because there's so many different things and there's so many different regions that reach out. So it keeps you on your toes and it's very, very interesting. But yeah, our psychologists that come new to start working with us, work with students, work with teachers, work with parents, do assessments and work with the students in individual therapy or in group therapy. It's very varied. So it's not just one sort of thing.
I think there's a bit of an urban myth about working in education in that you have to have an education qualification as well. Is that
absolutely you do not? Yeah. So we've got social workers and who work as counsellors. We have psychologists whose work is really, really varied. They can travel. They don't have to travel. Am I doing a good job trying to spruik the department? But there's a lot of different sort of variety. There's a lot of variety in the work. Yeah.
Susie, can I just add to that? You say you recruit from all over the place. Do you recruit through the general graduate program that the NTG offers?
Yes.
Yep.
Yep. Yep. And you can always just reach out to me. Or through Bruce as well. Yep.
Yeah. So within my role at the Mental Health Coalition, it is mainly about sector engagement. So my role is really connecting with community mental health organisations and the people that work within them. But also in a previous role that I held was around community engagement. I've crossed paths with a lot of different social workers, psychologists in different capacities. There's people working in the Department of Veterans Affairs, so supporting current or ex-serving members of the Defence Force. There's people working with culturally and linguistically diverse people who might be survivors of torture, but also thinking more remote. So in places like Catherine, there's one person I've crossed paths with, a social worker who's supporting providing clinical support to a service down there that's providing social emotional wellbeing support to community members down there. So there's quite a varied workforce within community mental health. Yeah, a lot of different experiences.
Great.
So at the child and adolescent mental health team, we work in a multidisciplinary team, so a whole variety of occupations. So there's psychologists, social workers, psychiatrists. We have a mental health nurse at the moment as well. So our main kind of the clients that we see at CAMS is the moderate to severe mental illnesses experienced with children up until the age of 18. So my day-to-day job looks at a bit of case management, mainly therapy, and a bit of assessment if we feel like that would help explain some of the broader complications that the young person might be experiencing. So that's what a day at CAMS looks like.
Okay, great. Given that your first job out of university is often the hardest one to get, it's the one you have to work the hardest to get. You're kind of coming out of uni, you've got lots of theory, maybe a tiny bit of practical experience, but no sort of out in the world real experience. So can you tell us how hard it was for you to get your first job, and what are the sorts of strategies that you put in place to sort of make sure that you were, you know, exiting out and having something to do?
So for me, my first job as a psychologist being at CAMS was helped by the fact that I had my master's placement was at CAMS. So that was my last placement. So I just continued on.
So it wasn't that hard for you?
No. And I had worked in the department for a while. So I worked in the top end mental health sector, which helped. So having that experience within mental health helped not only with, you know, job at CAMS, but also my master's application too. So I think when you are coming out of, you know, uni, whether it's undergrad or honours or masters, yeah, take the opportunity to just work in the fields, because all of that experience helps in the long run. And if I think about then going back into how I even got into the top end mental health service, I was lucky enough to have, I was a part of the Aboriginal Health Cadetship program. So they offered placements within the department. So having that placement experience helped me to build those relationships and build up those skills to then continue in my roles in top end mental health.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Be open to any opportunity you can get.
I think from my perspective, not only personally, but also within my current realm, once you finish, like once you graduate, you still have like awesome skill sets from like your own journeys as a human. So thinking about like the value of lived experience, thinking of it in a strength-based sort of focus, like you do have lived experiences and whatever areas. And there are a lot of organizations that could potentially feed into that, where you can contribute, not only using your social work background, but potentially from your experiences in life, to be able to support the community in that way. So that can be a really cool starting point, a bit of a compass sometimes. I know for me, that's where I started, basically, like I said, volunteering as a young person in sexual health, providing peer education to young people. That was sort of my step into the, like, I guess, strongly into the health field that led me to mental health as a career path.
Thank you. Yeah, I think both those things, the value of the relationships that you build, and then also your lived experience, that's pretty much me in a nutshell as well, because I studied in Germany and wanted to start my own practice immediately after I finished, and that's obviously wasn't in the stars. I was also a single mum with 3 kids, so that was a bit tricky. But I was working at a school while I was studying, so I built the relationships there. Also knew what it meant to work in a school through that lived experience. And so when I finished, I just happened to be looking for a school psychologist. So I got that job. Yep, second floor.
So for me, being a late starter and changing career, like it was more of a calling. Like I was a single mum as well, had a couple of kids, and I needed to get back into the workforce, but it was a desire to make a difference. And I just stayed true to that, and just opportunities opened up. It was amazing because I wasn't wavering. I just knew it was going to happen. I didn't know what it was going to look like exactly, but just staying connected to that desire to make a difference would be my words of wisdom. And then, so now, having been in the industry for quite some time, I still have a desire to make a difference, and I have a caseload as well, but I work with younger clinicians and embarking or helping them grow their practice, which is something now as an older practitioner I'm really passionate about as well. And the opportunity to move into management, which I have done with i2i, and being among other practitioners who still have that passion for practice is fabulous. So yeah.
Thank you. I'll just make 2 points. I think for me, as I mentioned earlier, I was a volunteer, and that worked for me in a very direct way. So I went from volunteering on a helpline to paid employment on helplines. So that's one point to make. And then the second one was to say as well that, so when, I guess after I'd graduated then from my social work degree, and I was a bit kind of rigid and fixed about what I wanted to do, and then couldn't find work, but then ended up, I think my first role was in an area that I didn't think I'd work in, didn't know much about. It was in a non-profit organization. It was part-time, so it was only 3 days a week. So it wasn't ideally what I was looking for, but the point was that once you get your foot in the door in places, and this has probably been a repeated pattern for me, taking up part-time roles or roles that sometimes are a bit lower level pretty quickly once you're in an organization. And if you do well, which is, you know, I did well because I'm fabulous, obviously, you know, you get promoted and there are opportunities that come. I think what I know is that I wasn't very good at interviews. I really struggled with the interviews, but I was good at the work. So that's why if I could get my foot in the door, and if the roles weren't ideal, it would be okay because I would prove myself quite quickly because I'm fabulous.
Tough act to follow. I would say I kind of did things in reverse. I worked through high school. I had 2 gap years where I worked. There was a significant workplace accident that happened in that second gap year, and that's one of the big reasons I chose to study psychology. We had psychologists come and talk us through that process. And then I guess quite accidentally, I got to the end of my honours year, and my honours supervisor said, I think you should consider coming back and doing a PhD. And I sort of didn't really know what that meant. I'm from Geraldton, from WA, so we don't have many of those where I come from. And I sort of had this difficult choice of go out and get a grad job or continue studying. So I applied for 2 grad jobs with West Australian Department of Health. Actually, during the interview, I actually realized one of them was not for me. That was a bit awkward. The other one I got, and then I got the PhD offer with the full scholarships and all the bells and whistles. So then that didn't really help me at all. So I had to pick one. So I picked PhD, but a kind of central experience in that was it's sort of assumed when you start a PhD or even when you finish honours that you can probably teach a bit. So my supervisor said you should probably start teaching a class in something. So I did, and then I chatted to some other academics, and one of them said something that's really stuck with me forever. He said, if all you do is PhD and you don't teach, you just become this really, you know, ivory tower academic who loses the touch, you know. And if all you do is teach, then why do we bother, you know, giving you a research degree? So you've got to do both. And I think doing both has not only made me a better researcher, it's made me a better academic and teacher, because you sort of never lose sight of the real world stuff when you're still in the teaching game. You're still surrounded by students. And I think what's great about CDU and the modern uni environment now is our students already have careers, already have work and life experiences, and already know where they want to go. It's not that long ago I was studying, but when I was, it was more people who had no idea or had no experience. So I would say now the really rewarding thing from teaching is I get a better sense of what's happening on the ground. And that can help me shape my teaching and give me some insights into research as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Let's take our career hats off now and put our hiring manager hats on. What sorts of things do you look for in candidates who might come and work in your area?
I guess for us, it's easy if you can write, if you have a couple of degrees. Most of what I do is writing. I write curriculum, I write lectures, I write reports, I write papers, I write articles, I write a lot of emails. So if you're good at writing, and I think that's one of the reasons I got sort of picked, was my supervisor knew I was good at writing and threw me into the PhD game. And then like my first paper I sent him, he said, "This is terrible, you'll have to improve." So I didn't really know what was going on, but the scale had changed there. So yeah, I think what academics look for when we're hiring is people who can write, synthesize information, people who are very analytical, but also people who are creative. You know, the field needs new ideas and diversity. So yeah, if you're looking for a research career, writing, essential. If you can read, that helps too. But most of the game is writing, thinking, reading, and sometimes lying on the couch.
For me, I think attitude is key. So I think it's fine if you don't know stuff. In fact, I think that's better. I think you're a safer practitioner certainly starting off in your career if you are aware of that and you don't know that, but you're open to learning and feedback. So yeah, an open attitude, prepared to have a go, to make mistakes. That's, I think, really key. And I suppose there's an aspect as well, which is something that would not necessarily you'd have it from the beginning, but at least to be aware of, have the beginnings of emotional intelligence. So I guess just the being open to that and that emotions and your emotional responses to things are valid and important. I think for a practitioner, for a social worker in a whole variety of roles, I think that's really important, really essential. But again, not necessarily you have to have it all sorted out and stuff. You might need to get on the couch and have years of therapy like I did, so you don't freak out about everything all the time. I still do freak out a bit though sometimes. And that's okay too, isn't it? Right.
I think you get a bit addicted to the couch, don't you? So what do we look for? What do we look for? So at ISA, we have clinicians. Some are on salary, some are sessional, and they can see anywhere from 2 to 5 or 6 clients per day. So what we're looking for is somebody who has a desire to make a difference, a passion for their practice, that shows up. There can be a team player, super important, that has that emotional intelligence and the communication skills, not only in the role that they're hired into, but also to communicate well with colleagues, other staff members, managers, and that have a commitment to professional and personal development. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, we are student wellbeing and inclusion, so it would really help if you liked children. That's probably a good place to start. But all of these things as well, like writing is probably important because there are reports that need to be written as a psych that works at a school. Attitude is hugely important because having some positivity and the will to change things as well, and all the things that you said. But I think being able to work in schools also needs the ability to be able to work across the generations, because you're working sometimes with older people, you work with grandparents, you work with children, you work with teachers that are very stuck in their ways. So I think being able to navigate relationships is very important. But yeah, just openness and attitude is a big part of it as well.
Yeah, what they said. No, yeah, definitely the thing that stands out for me, especially for like the broader mental health sector, is having that openness to learn. Just thinking about the context of the Northern Territory as a whole, it is quite diverse. So cultural context, so some knowledge around that would be really helpful, but also just being open to different ways of working. A clinical approach isn't always the right answer. So there's a lot of resources and stuff out there to help support you in that journey, but you've got to be open to it, because you are going to work with, Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people, LGBTIQA plus people, culturally and linguistically diverse people, and there's no one approach for each kind of demographic. So openness to learn would be great.
Well, at CAMS, we do look more at the moderate to severe mental illness in young people. So same things, willingness to work with young people and their families is a big thing. But when you're looking at that moderate to severe, most of the positions that we do have are for clinicians that have that experience. But of course, there are positions there for, new grads. And same thing like what Ara was just saying, is that openness to learn. You don't have to have all the tools or all the skills straight away to come in, because we have, you just have to have that openness to then build up your skills within the like the cultural and awareness trainings, which we do all in-house at Department of Health anyways. But yeah, most often when we get people who apply for us, if you are doing some sort of studies within child and adolescent mental health or family therapy, they're also, quite preferable. Yeah, right.
Thank you. Okay, that's great. Thanks very much. I'm going to throw it open for any questions from the floor now. I hope you've been thinking about what you've been listening to. Anyone brave enough to ask a question? Yeah, we've got to just hang on a sec. We'll bring a microphone down to you.
So my question was, what changes do you think should be brought to the field of social work in Australia right now?
Oh, asking the hard questions.
Yeah. Oh, actually, I don't know now. Now I'm freaking out. Look, there's so much. Where can I start? And you'll have your own ideas as well. There's a lot that's challenging and difficult. Probably a lot of you would be aware that social work's not a registered profession. So that means that technically at the moment, anyone can call themselves a social worker and practice as a social worker. So it's also not a protected title. So I think it's not true for psychology or you can correct me if I'm wrong, and nursing or a doctor. It's not legal, is it, to say that you are that if it's a registered profession and a registered protected title. Yeah, so I think that's something that needs to change. But I think the pathway, the route to doing that should be one that's based on recognition of the skills and expertise and value that social work can bring to communities and to society. It shouldn't be about us being a risk to society and we need to protect people from social workers, which is a little bit how the debate is currently being framed, and that concerns me. I'm just going to stop there because I can go on and on and on and on, but I think other people can. You don't have to speak as a socialist. What do you say?
I think when it comes to social work, there's probably a lot of pressure put onto social workers within their fields where perhaps the expectation is up here and it's like, well, this social worker, this person or this team only has X amount of resources. So perhaps really thinking about the dialogue around like how do other, I think within the community mental health space, like what other resources are actually available to support social workers, whether it's clinical support or whether it's non-clinical. So thinking about peer workers, thinking about the lived experience, thinking about social emotional well-being, to kind of, I guess, ease the pressure and expectation off of social workers in that way, and actually bringing more of a community focus, bringing people to the table rather than thinking that social workers are there just to solve all the problems. Does that make sense? Thoughts?
Okay. Any other questions? Perfect opportunity to ask. If you're thinking it, someone else is probably thinking it too. Yeah, thank you.
I'm just curious to know what made you choose social work and what gave you the courage to choose this as a profession. I'm just curious to know what brought you in this field. Thank you.
I think so. Social.
Okay.
Sorry. No, that's okay. I think for me it was the diversity, the options that are open to you with a social work degree are humongous. Like it's such a variety of roles that you can apply for with that social work degree. So yeah, I think for me, it was the diversity of my of the possibilities and the opportunities.
I think for me, I was drawn to the social justice focus of social work. So I believe that social work should be a positive, change-orientated profession that is committed to the pursuit of social justice. I remain committed to that. I was a bit of an activist before finding my way into social work, so I guess I was kind of more community development focused and more activist in my approach to social work. And I think that's kind of remained as well. Can I suggest that we broaden this question out to the psychologists as well? So we make it, what was it, the same question, but for psychology? There you go.
Sure. Yeah, I can speak to how psychology needs to change.
No, it was the one about what drew you.
What drew me to the fact that it needs to change. No, I think for me, it's really interesting. We live in we live in precedented times, right? I've just come out of a lecture, so I'm not going to lecture you, but there's a winding back of perspectives, voices, rights at the moment. And I think for most of its life, psychology's had a pretty nice Western Eurocentric understanding of the world. And that's fractured now. It doesn't work. It doesn't work well enough for all of us. So I think there's been some really good concerted efforts in psychology to correct that, which is why we live in interesting times at the moment with forces trying to wind that back. So I think in a lot of ways, social work and psychology and other mental health professions need to kind of rally around that. But for me, psychology is inherently interesting because humans are inherently and intrinsically complex. And I think 2 gap years in a public service job, I got very bored very quickly. And once things get boring to me, they're no longer that interesting. And there's never a day I wake up as an academic in the field of psychology and working with psychologists as colleagues and social workers and all of us that I'm ever bored. There's always something we can be doing, whether it's, designing an interface for a new car to like figuring out why people don't know they're burnt out until they're already burnt out. There's so many big questions to answer. So I think that's what's drawn me to psychology, seeing that impact of the workplace accident we were involved in and how the support was rallied around that and the impact that had a really profound impact on me. And I've never really looked back. I don't know if that helps answer that question. Yeah, yep. But there's always something we can be figuring out.
Anyone else add to that?
Just lost my train of thought. I'll pass it on real quick.
is this what drew us to psychology? Is that what we're looking at? Yeah. And our motivations. Yeah. Well, I guess thinking about what drew me to psychology and why I decided to persist with this career is how rewarding it is at the end of it, because you get to work with, for me at the moment, young people, but if you then work with adults or just people in general, and they open up to you a lot of their lives that they might not be opening up to with anyone else. And there's that privilege of being able to help someone in their darkest times, and then not just their darkest times, but seeing them through that. And it's really rewarding work. And that's, I guess, the motivations for me, even when I worked at the mental health, in forensic mental health, I got to see a lot of vulnerable populations and people in that field. And so I thought maybe if I do continue this career as a psychologist, then I can be doing more. Because obviously as an average mental health worker, there was, you know, that support and a bit of that case management was involved in that job, but to really kind of connect on a deeper level with through therapeutic interventions, or to do assessments and what Dr. Kim was talking about, figuring things out and helping a person to truly understand what might be going on for them and help them through that, is actually really, yeah, it's a really big privilege that you get. So that's what drew me to psychology and why, yeah, I'm here.
I just remembered my train of thought. So in terms of speaking broadly, what drew me to like the mental health sector in particular, I knew even when I was actually trying to go through my uni journey, which is still ongoing, I always had this question of like, well, I know I want to help people, but how? How do I do it? Obviously, psychology and social work, that's one option. It's very front-facing, one-on-one, kind of individualized. But then for me, realizing that actually there's different ways for me to actually contribute to help people, but also to support the community, which is how I fell into more like community education, community development. So I think, yeah, just thinking about different ways of helping, that was my motivation, which was a bit of a fun experience.
Thanks. I'm in a very, very different place now psychologically than I was when I first got drawn to psychology. So I think I've always found humans and people incredibly interesting. I love how everyone thinks differently, everyone works differently, and I've always wanted to understand that. So I think that's sort of I grew up in PNG, my parents were missionaries, and their answer to everything was because God wants it that way. And that wasn't enough for me for a long time. So I remember going to boarding school and for the first time learning about Freud and Jung, which now is really old school. But at that point in time, I was like, oh my goodness, there's a different explanation to these things. And I found that so interesting. I remember my teacher drawing this huge circle on the boards and saying, this is you, and then a tiny pinpoint saying, and this is what you know about yourself. And I was like, oh, I want to know more. So that's what drew me to psychology.
Okay. Did you want to add anything? No, right. Any last questions? Yeah. Oh, now they're on fire. Just took them a while to warm up.
I'm about to finish my course end of 2026, and one of the fields that I really want to explore is family violence. I know that while studying social work, you are actually eligible to work in the industry. However, what my question is around organizations not wanting to hire fresh social workers or students still studying social workers. So maybe I throw it out to Andrew and other social workers here. What is it that we can do to effectively communicate that we do have the skills, or we do have the understanding of the industry or willingness to learn and to prove our competency to work with those cohorts? But a lot of time we are just turned away because organizations wanting to hire someone with 5 or 10 years of experience.
Yeah, easy question. No, it's a difficult one. So it's a shame that there isn't anyone here actually from an organization that you're talking about, because I think that we need to be developing the future workforce, and I would hope that organizations understand that by investing in and making time to support new practitioners is important. But I suppose coupled with that is a concern around the complexity of the work, the service demands, the pressures, the lack of funding, etc. So there may be it might be about anxieties around balancing and meeting those requirements. I think that and maybe the people from industry can say more, but I think what is good is knowing a lot about the organization. It might be in some way engaging with them, attending events. If there's training that's offered that which there is, I've seen stuff that's around in this area, sometimes for free, I think, actually, as well, from Dawn House, I think, is that right? So where you can kind of evidence that you have learnt about the industry and stuff like that. So yeah, do you have anything to add?
Just agreeing with everything you've said. And if you've got an organisation in mind that you would like to work with, really persisting, like showing up, showing your face, not just emailing your resume, but turning up with your resume, offering to volunteer, or asking them what trainings that you could do that would help get a foot in the door. Yeah, but I love that you're really clear about what it is that you want to do. So it'll just a matter of making it happen. Yeah.
Can I just add, sorry, because the other thing that I've found in the 2.5 years that I've been in the territory, it is very much about networking and relationships. And so you're talking about more of a direct approach. I think that goes a long way here in the NT. It's all about people. I mean, I know lots of people that, I know Jeff, who you work with. Well, you know Jeff. Like basically, I'm just trying to illustrate the point. Well, I know someone that used to work with you. But I said, "Oh, did you know so and so?" I'm supervising students in SWIPS soon, and I know Karina Betchart. Yes, see, right. So can you see all the connections? And that's very much an NT kind of thing. That's just not that I'm brilliant and know everybody. I've really found that here there's much more of that. I am brilliant though, aren't I?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
That if we take a community psychology perspective, the NT's got limited resources, yeah. So if you're turning up to things that people in your profession turn up to, people will start to pay attention to that. So it's not just necessarily the direct approach or the networking events like this. And I believe, don't want to speak for social work, it's very important in social work to be living those values.
Yeah.
So I think what I've learned in the territory from Andrew's wonderful 6 degrees of separation lesson here is it's about showing that you turn up. And I think a great example of this was I bought a secondhand car off someone, and then I saw them at the pub 6 months later and they offered me a job. Because, and like, when do you ever sell a secondhand car to someone and ever want to see them again? Only in the territory. Like, so that guy was obviously like, this guy's stuck around. Maybe I'll give him this opportunity. Didn't want the job, didn't particularly want the car, but the broader lesson is like, people in the territory, I think, really respect and acknowledge people who turn up consistently and show their staying power. As much as it's tough, as much as we need to work on the self-care piece and the burnout stuff, I think it's about turning up and showing your values.
Okay, we've probably got time for one more.
Where's the pizza?
I am an international student, majoring in psychology, undergraduate, doing my undergraduate degree. But into 1 month into my semester, I still haven't found any proper part-time jobs which is connected to my study field. My question is, are there really any job for undergraduate students who are complete freshers and have zero experiences so that they can work with being connected to their study field?
Yeah, I would say this is tricky for psychology because of the pathways and the protected title status and all these kinds of things. I'll say something very briefly and then pass on. But it's kind of being in places where psychology is going on is almost as good as you might be able to do in undergrad. So if you picked up work, you know, volunteering space, the kind of telephone counseling sort of stuff, you can pick that sort of thing up. I think what we look for a lot in clinical programs and in industry is people who have experience talking to people and being around where psychology and social work happen. Yeah, but I'll pass down the line.
We do offer places to new graduates full-time, but we're open to having discussions with brand new graduates to help you. But yeah, it's just getting your foot in the door and being tenacious and that kind of thing. But we do have places for new graduates, but not part-time, unfortunately. Yeah.
I think this is one of the times where I'd be like, if you can't find something directly linked to like your undergrad in terms of psychology, probably broaden it to the mental health sector, similar to what was just being said earlier, where you can still have exposure to, again, a different way of working. You're still working within mental health. You might be able to practice some of the things that you're learning in that context, but it's about broadening your perspective around what work actually looks like. I think one org that I'd probably say to you to kind of think about, they're outside actually, they're called Team Health. So that could be a potential like person that you talk to. Definitely develop those relationships. So use that time to, you know, link up with those crew outside. But yeah, just off the top of my head, that would be one place where I know that, yeah, they've got a range of different programs and a range of different roles, but across, again, community mental health, there is potential there. But yeah, it might not just meet what you're expecting. Yeah.
Said exactly what I wanted to say. But yeah, building on what they were saying, because psychology is a protected kind of title, you can't do anything directly as a psychologist until you have gotten that registration. But beforehand, while you're in your undergrad and you're trying to get that experience, definitely the mental health sector, like community mental health, Team Health, yeah, Headspace. There's lots of different kind of roles out there for not quite psychology, but you're in that field. So you're getting a bit of that taste and that experience. So when you are deciding to further develop that career and go down psychology, that would look a lot better on the resume, or when you're applying for masters or whatever, and future jobs too, because you've got that experience in that field, even though it's not directly psychology, if that makes sense.
Okay, so unfortunately, that's all we have time for, or fortunately, there's pizza in the foyer area, and there are lots of people out there for you to talk to. So make sure you are brave and you ask your questions, that you introduce yourself, that you tell a bit about your story, and that you listen to what they have to say. So would you join me in thanking the panel this afternoon for their words of wisdom? Thank you so much. That was great. And we'll now adjourn to the foyer for some networking. Thanks, everyone.